Howdy, everybody. Shasta College, Humanities 4. It's Thursday. What is the date? 17th? Yes, 17. We got another month of school left. That's it. We're off for a couple days next week. So, um, that's what's happening this week. Um, I got two more essays to got a grade. The last two are still there, so I'm working on those this week. I'm not going to sign you an essay this week, but I might sign you one next week. So be ready for that. Um, Today, I want to talk about your journals. Make sure you're keeping up on those and that you're going to submit those. That they won't be due to the last week, along with the last research paper you're going to do, which I'll talk about that more at a later date, not right now. Um, Research paper is going to be different than the essays. It's going to be an actual research paper where you have a works cited page, MLA format, works cited page, the whole bit, and I'll pick the topic. I'll probably give you guys 5 topics to choose from. You pick your own from those topics. It'll be genres or directors or be more specific. And it is a research paper. However you do your research, it's online. You can use the textbook, obviously. Also, YouTube videos, the whole bit. It's all out there, but that's going to be up to you. You probably have plenty of time to do it, so don't worry about it. It's worth quite a few points, 20, so it's like your defining moment. It's gonna take everything you've done with the essays and put it in a great research paper. It's gonna impress the heck out of me. You're not gonna copy and paste anything from Wikipedia or some other source like that, because 'cause I'll spot it. Anyway, you wouldn't do that anyway, I trust you. So, hope you're all doing well, probably all getting prepared for family Thanksgiving next week. Um, so I'll try to make this as painless as possible. What we have left going, but we've got quite a few. We're going to cover some ground today. I'm going to do women directors. Um, and then I'll probably be doing 90s films, which I call the films of Sundance, up until the contemporary films right now. But I might toss in a couple other things like musicals, and which I'm definitely going to do, and Japanese horror, which is a different sort of horror than we have. Um, yeah, so we're not done yet. We still got a ways to go. I hope you enjoyed the documentary. I didn't really talk about another documentary, a couple more filmmakers. I'm going to talk about one tonight, a woman. Actually, two of these women have documentaries. Penelope Spears, um, who came out in the era of, made a punk rock documentary called The Decline and Fall of Western Civilization, and about the punk rock years of LA, not the New York scene, the LA scene. And so there was bands like X and Fear, the Germs in there. If you know anything about punk rock, it's my era when I lived in LA, so I knew these bands. So it was an important s- the documentary to depict these sort of this music scene that hadn't been depicted. It was kind of scary to most middle Americans, and all music scenes are scary. The hippies scared them. Jazz scared them. It's good to be scared. Uh, it means they're getting through. They're batting down the walls of conformity, and that's definitely what that documentary did. And she went on later to do the decline and fall of the metal years, and then she did another decline and fall that came out in the '90s, like Street Punks or something. This what didn't have much to do about music, mostly about homeless kids and street punks in LA, which there was a lot or is a lot out there still. Kind of sad situation in our culture. But in the meantime, they hauled her in and she had a bit of a Hollywood career. Directed some movies by the studios. Like the Beverly Hillbillies, the remake of that's needed to be remade. I'm being sarcastic. I hope you know that. She did The Little Rascals. She did Wayne's World and made some money on that one. So they hired her for some interesting movies, but her forte is the documentaries. And I think recently in an interview, she said she's not going back to direct those kind of movies anymore. Uh, she saved her money and got out, which is good for her. But they gave her lightweight movies to make the Hollywood studios. That's how they disrespect women for the most part. They don't think they could take on the heavy stuff like Star Wars or X-Men or John Wick. Those aren't women directors. It's only recently that some strong female directors are getting to direct some of those. They are. Black Panther is a good example. So Penelope was a groundbreaker that way, as all these women are. They're the one uh, old groundbreaker, old film star. Actually, she was a film star in Germany in the 20s. Lena uh, Rothenstein, and she she started as an actress in Germany, and in what they call mountain climbing video movies. That was the genre that was popular, and she was very athletic and did some of those. But she wanted to direct movies, and it was not easy to do. But she started directing some films, and she directed probably two most famous, infamous documentaries in the history of this country because she was working for the Nazi Germany's Hitler and Goebbels, who was the propaganda uh, czar, loved her, and so she made two of the most heavy propaganda films in Germany before the World War II, and Triumph of the Will, and then she also did Olympiad, which was about the 1936 Olympics. Crying out here. Get out, you. Get out. Coming in Delaware or not? You're not here all day. Come on. I'll wait for you. Rayford style. Um, Lena was a complex woman who never said she was a Nazi, but there's many video. They didn't have video in those days, but there's many film uh, eyewitness accounts that she was at many parties with Hitler and was chummy with all of them. And she says she was just trying to get her films made. Okay, that could be, but it's who finances your films that you're involved with that says who you are. She loved movies so much she's willing to let the Nazis finance her. Yes, she was. And these films are very powerful. Olympiad was about the 1936 Olympics in Germany, and how they were going to win all the awards, but they didn't. And guess who won a bunch of the gold medals? Black U.S. runners. And this did not please Hitler because they were the superior race. Remember, that's their whole thing. And to have somebody like Jesse Owens, who won a lot of the running races, to get the gold medal was really a bitter pill for the Nazis to swallow. Anyway, it's a real pomp and circumstance um, documentary that shows the glory of the Aryan race, evidently. And then the other one she made, which was a propaganda film for the rise of Nazism. It's called Triumph of the Will, and she shows Nazis in all of their glory. The pomp and circumstance. She doesn't show the violence, or this is before the war, folks, but she shows the terror, the lockstep marching, and but the film is really fascinating to watch because the techniques she uses were groundbreaking. She had a ability to put the camera where they were seen before. She'd put them on lower. She put them on carts and rolled them along before they had all the. We have all the tricky stuff now to do that with. So she was creating these incredible visuals. Later on, she was charged as being a Nazi war criminal, sympathetic to Nazis, but she was never convicted. She spent the rest of her life making documentaries and taking still photographs in Africa of African Americans that celebrated the African American human body in motion. And a lot of people feel they're very racist. She said they're not racist. She was doing it with love and care. And she never apologized. She lived quite old, into her 90s, I do believe. There's a great documentary about her. And she never apologized for 1 second. She said, I'm a filmmaker, and that's all I was concerned with. Very strong woman who somehow survived all of that. It takes a lot of strength to be a filmmaker, and Hollywood is 90% male. So is most of the world, 90% male. There are filmmakers who are not male who started early on in Hollywood in the 1920s and earlier, early silent films. Um, Good example would be, let me see her name here. Where is she? Oh yeah, Alice Alice Guy Blanchet and Louise Weber were two groundbreaking silent film directors. They directed films in the Hollywood system during the silent era, and their films were very well received and they made money. These women knew how to make their films made money. And they usually had uh, feminist themes like abortion and things like that, which was unheard of for the time. Hell, it's hardly unheard of now. And they had very successful careers behind the camera. Um, I'll post some of this stuff on YouTube. You can see it on your canvas. And their careers were essentially after the silent era is over. Talkies came in. We never heard much about them because what was a regular thing to do in those days, film celluloid comes in big um, reels, and it takes up a lot of storage. And you have to have them temperature gauged to preserve the film. They have to be at a certain temperature. And so Hollywood has some storage units, but they didn't have enough. And so guess what they used to do, folks, regularly? That's why we don't have that many silent films left. They used to take the silent films and destroy them to make room for the new films. They destroyed hundreds of films over the years. Um, and then just along with it, so much of the rich cinema history was destroyed with it. They were not far-sighted, thinking about the future at all. They're just thinking about storage space. And so people like Lois, 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 sorry, and Alice were kind of a footnote in history. But if you have the Criterion channel, that's a channel they have to subscribe to. Uh, they have their films on there, and they're different than the male films because they have a female perspective, and we needed to see that. Um, but were they? And at one time, they were as big at the box office as Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton. They were. Their films made money, which is the name of the game in Hollywood. But did they ever get a chance to actually direct films in the sound era? No. And they died mostly in the 70s, 1970s. As like I said, they were a footnote to the Hollywood history because they were women. Um, One of the revolutionary women of the day was an actress named Ida Lupino. She was a film, usually played a femme fatale in film noir movies. Her One of her greatest roles is in High Sierra with Humphrey Bogart, which is the film that made him a star. Humphrey Bogart had been around for many years, but he always played a bad guy who was not the lead in the movie. But this movie made him a lead, and it came out in 1941 or thereabouts, and he is mesmerizing, and his girlfriend is played by Ida Lupino, and this kind of defined her roles also in Hollywood films. She was always the femme fatale. Remember what that meant from the film noir, the fatal female. She was a tough as nails, loyal woman who lived outside of society, drank with the men, smoked cigarettes with the men, and a lot of times this is a girlfriend of mobsters. But she was felt curtailed by these roles. She didn't want to be just another pretty face working in the system. She wanted more. She desired more. She wanted to direct. Not going to happen. But by chance, some she was working on a movie and the director got sick, and so she stepped in and directed for a couple of weeks till he came back, and people saw that she was very capable. And so from then on, which is about 1948 or so, 49, she directed half a dozen films, low budget films, definitely B movies. Um, Her most famous one would be called Hitchhiker. I'll show you if remember. I'm going to put a clip up of that on modules. Um, about two guys going on a fishing trip. They're out in the desert. I don't know what lake they're going to out there, but that's what they used to do in those days. Because it was cheap. There's no sets. You film outside. You got natural lighting. It's a low budget film with two actors, and then they have the unfortunate experience of picking up a hitchhiker who happens to be a mad serial killer, just like we all fear, right? And now he's taking them hostages, and the rest of the movie plays out the three of them, and it's a very um, taut piece of directing. Uh, it's not fancy. They don't have the money for that, and she got the job done, and it was profitable. And so she filmed a film company with her then husband, and they made some more films, usually with a female perspective. Like she had one film where the bigamist, about a guy a nice guy, uh, but he's married to two women, and that's against the law. And But you feel for the guy as you watch the movie, and so they're unusual films, very well done. Definitely fall into the B category of the filler in movie at the movie theaters in those days. So they used to have the A film, which would be the big movie stars, and they'd have newsreels or cartoons in between, or maybe a short subject, and then they'd have a B film that started the film. You got your money's worth in those days for your 50 cents. And the B film was usually a movie that was made quickly, usually a film noir or sci-fi or horror movie, made in sometimes 5 or 6 days. But those over the years have become, in some ways, just beautiful blueprints in how to get a film made cheaply. Sometimes these films would cost less than $100,000. And so that was a great niche. It's a great training ground for Ida. She went on to, after her career was fading in the movies, she went on to direct just about every major television show there was in the 60s. Yes, she even directed Bewitched, Gilligan's Island. She got the work where she could get the work. Later on, she did some acting again. She's in uh, a very well done film by my favorite director, Sam Peckinpah. It's called Junior Bonner. She plays the mother of Steve McQueen. So she still was acting up until she passed away in the I think before the 80s. I think 1980s. But she was a revolutionary figure for women filmmakers who tried to do it their way and succeeded for a while. In the 60s, a filmmaker, a female, there wasn't very many working in Hollywood at all. Um, Outside of Hollywood was a kind of a trust fund woman, Shirley Clark, who was doing some experimental documentaries around New York City. She got the contract to do a really fine film called The Connection. Came out in about 1960 61. Um, about It was based on a famous off Broadway play about heroin addicts who are jazz musicians, and they're waiting for their heroin connection. They're all waiting for the drugs in this rooming house. That's the entire play, folks. They're waiting for their connection. It was a controversial play at the time when it came out in the 50s because we don't want to see drug use like that. We want to think everything's pure and clean and nobody has drug addictions like this, but they do. And of course, it's jazz musicians, so it's kind of like, oh, they're typical. Uh, the other part, controversial part, there had be shut down a couple times. The production, I should say, the play, because evidently some of the musicians were actually shooting up real heroin on stage. That could be an urban myth. We don't know. But anyway, she got the contract to do the movie. It's a really nice shot, black and white movie. I'll put a clip up for you to look at because I know how you love your black and white. But it's gritty, it's entertaining, and in the movie, a documentary filmmaker is making a movie about these people's struggles, and so they break the fourth wall a lot and talk to the right to the audience. So who was that? I'm gonna forget. Who did I just say? Shirley Clark. Yeah, show a clip. Okay. Um, Later on, after Connection, she did a couple of movies. Never went very far, and she was always struggling to find financiers. And but she kept the faith and kept writing scripts and trying to work on things um, until the day she died. So the desire and drive to make a movie never stops, whether your funding dries up or not. Look at Orson Welles. For the last 30 years of his life, he couldn't get a film made, and he kept writing scripts and scripts. He kept holding out hope that he could get his film made. And of course, he died writing his film script at 70. He was still hopeful to get a film going when he died in about 1986 or 7, 88, in there, that era. The great Orson Welles from Citizen Kane. The dream never dies. Barbara Loden was an actress. She had success off Broadway and Broadway. She married a very powerful, famous film director, Elia Kazan. Uh, he'd already had a family. She was the new kind of trophy wife, blonde, and they did a play together, Arthur Miller play called After the Fall, and it's thinly disguised version of Arthur Miller's relationship with Marilyn Monroe. And He was married to her. It did not go well. Um, he wrote The Misfits, the movie, with for her in mind, and she had her mentality was very fragile. Nowadays, they put her on medication. She was probably at the least bipolar, maybe even schizophrenic. But she got to be to where she was impossible to be with or to talk to or to work, and their marriage fell apart. Um, and he wrote this play about that, and Elia Kazan directed it because Elia Kazan directed quite a few. He had directed other Arthur Miller plays like Death of a Salesman, and Barbara got noticed, but she had a hankering to direct. She wanted to control what she was doing also. So it wasn't until about 1970 or there she wrote and directed a movie called Wanda. And because of her husband's connections, she raised approximately $150,000 and got to shoot her movie that she stars in about a woman who makes some poor choices and the boyfriend, her boyfriend, who's a bank robber, treats her like crap. And it's kind of a road movie. They're on the road, they're in motels. Very well done. She's an intense actress, intense, true believer in trying to make her film. She's one of the first independent film made by a woman that got noticed internationally. Noticed. Uh, she didn't get much work from that. She also died young of breast cancer, 48 years old. And she was working on stuff right up to the very end, trying to get things made. But at least she got that one film that was her story, her passion, that she got to go get out in the world. That's the thing with film, and maybe all art. Getting it out into the world is real important. Yes, you could do it by yourself. You could paint in your house. You could write a novel nobody ever reads. You can make a movie that nobody ever sees. But that's not going to fulfill this drive and desire to put something out in the world. And these women all had that. You put something out in the world that says, look what I've done. I was here at this point in time. I did this thing. I have this to show for it. I mattered. Other female directors at the time that were coming up in the independent scene, Kelly Right Hart, I think that's how she says her name. Uh, Very much independent filmmaker that was when independent films, because of Sundance in the late 80s, early 90s, were starting to show these films. She made a great film called River of Grass about two low lifes living in Florida, but they're trying to leave Florida. They're trying to leave this town, and they never leave the whole movie. They never get out. They're on their way out, but they never succeed. There's a beautiful grace to it. There's humor to it. You wouldn't know the actors. It seems like it's actually happening to real people. That's how real it seems. Later on, she got to direct some other films. She still directs. None of her films have ever got to the mainstream, but she's got mainstream actors in there now. Two of her movies have starred Michelle Williams. You know who that is? She's the star of the new Steve Spielberg movie. People want to work with her. She did one called hmm, hmm. People want to work with her. Actors want to work with her, even though they don't get paid much. It's not always about the money. But she did one a movie called Old Joy, which is one of my favorites. Just two slacker dudes who go on a camp out and they just talk about their issues. One's kind of grown up. His wife's gonna have a baby. He's got, he's trying to do the right thing by having a job and buying a house. And the other one still just wants to kick back, smoke a joint, and be a kid still. And yet one's going this way, one's going this way. They're both, pushing 30 or whatever it is. And so there's the two guys in this camp out kind of is going to separate their relationship. One's going one way, one's going the other. And that's how life takes us on that journey. And so her stuff is very, not a lot goes on in it, not big plot, no shootings, no car chases. She did another one with Michelle Williams. I can't think of the name of it, where she's a homeless girl, loses her job. She's living in her car with her dog and literally doesn't know what to do with herself. But she knows she's got to somehow find her way out of it. And it's a heartbreaking story because she's unemployed. She can't afford rent. She's living in her car, and her only relationship she has is vending meetings with her dog. But she feels that she can't take the next step in her life without the dog, and so she leaves the dog behind. And so you have heartbreak for everybody. Nobody wins in that movie. Anyway, so she's still out there. She still does what she does and believes in it very fiercely. And she still films with film, I do believe. She likes to film with Super 16, which is it's expensive and it's rare to even find this footage anymore. And so she's is this true cinema cinephile. She believes in the power of cinema to tell a human story on a human level with a camera lens. In France, during the new French New Wave, which we talked about already, there was a woman there, Agnes Varna. She directed a movie called Chloe 1 through 5. Five. It was part of the French New Wave. She didn't get as much notice as the other boys because she's not as flashy. But she had a long, long career. She's died recently. She lived into her 90s. She made a lot of documentaries, and she's very well thought of and as um, a groundbreaker in cinema, French cinema, world cinema, global cinema, whatever you want to call it. Um, who never gave up. She was filming in video towards the end because that's where it was cheap. And she could do that. There's a great documentary about her. Um, you guys should check it out if you can. It's wonderful. Seeing a free spirited, artistic woman trying to make her place in the world of cinema. Not a Hollywood career, folks. Um, but other people who did have Hollywood careers, one of them would be, trying to think of her name, Coppola. Um, Francis Ford Coppola's daughter has had a pretty healthy Hollywood career. Now she's got a big step up, folks. Her dad's one of the biggest directors in the history of cinema, but she's made some really good films. Sofia Coppola, maybe a scene Lost in Translation with Bill Murray and Scarlett Johansson. Maybe a scene her first movie, The Virgin Suicides. Um, she's always looking to do a story. Usually has a female perspective. Female accessibility in it is different, folks. It's you have to look at their films to tell me the difference. I would say their difference is they so many women see the world differently than trying to defeat it, trying to make it mold it into what they think they need, like men do. That's why we have all these John Wicks and Rambo running around with knives and guns. They're gonna beat the world into what they want. Women do it in a more subtle way. Uh, Kathy Bigelow is another great example of someone who's really not subtle. She directs with the big boys. She's won the Academy Award for Hurt Locker, the only woman to ever do that. The first woman to do that, by the way. Her films are very male driven. They're not female at all. You wouldn't know who directed it besides a powerful visionary. She did one of my favorite films of hers is Point Break, about the surfers Patrick Swayze, Keanu Reeves. Surfers are bank robbers, and Keanu goes undercover to bust them. And it's got a real punk rock attitude to it. She did Zero Dark 30 about the killing of Osama bin Laden. And she also did Detroit, which is a really fierce movie about the Detroit riots in the late 60s, where the police went up against the black population and almost burned down the whole town. Um, Kathy Bigelow's movie that put her on the map is my favorite. It's called Near Dark. It's, I think, one of the best vampire movies ever made. It's a vampire movie the likes you've never seen before. I will show a clip of that. You should check it out. You should check all these movies out. I know you don't. You don't think you have time. You have time. Um, Near Dark is a very unusual vampire movie. Vampires, they're kind of white trash vampire, trailer trash vampires who are traveling the land during daylight, by the way, in a Winnebago, but all the windows are blanked out. And they wear arc welder goggles, because vampires, they burn up in the sunlight. But she gets around that. No cross or holy water is going to hurt these people. They're outlaws in America, and that's what it comes from. It's really, really hardcore punk rock attitude. And then they kidnap somebody to kill them, because they have to feed every night. And the woman doesn't kill him because they start falling in love with one of the female vampires, and so they start turning him into a vampire. But it takes a while, but he has to learn how to hunt people eventually. He can't just live off their kindness. Eventually, you have to murder to stay alive as a vampire. He wasn't cut out for it, and so he fights it. And things don't turn out well. They turn out well for him and the girl, but not for the vampire gang. Um, led by the great Lance Henderson, and I can't think of the other actor who's just wonderful, who died way too young. Anyway, I'll show you a clip of that. It's a very unusual vampire movie done by Kathy Bigelow with the help of her then husband, who was the big director from Avatar, and James Cameron, and Titanic, and the rest of that stuff. Um, she used his film crew, so she had a lot of help from him. Then of course, he left her for another woman. That's what he does. Um, Kathy Bigelow is still strong. She's still out there developing projects, and they're all usually big budgeted, and a lot of them are very, very, I would say, male driven stories. She does them. She's Nobody does them better than Catherine Bigelow. So that's another example of a strong female who's actually broke through the male barrier in Hollywood, which is rare, and won the Academy Award. This is starting to happen more and more now. They're starting to trust women with any story. It doesn't have to be just a female story or a rom com, and that's what they usually have to do. Like Penny Marshall was another director who was an actress, who mostly got to direct rom coms because that's what women do. They can only direct that kind of stuff. They can't direct. They're not going to give them Pirates of the Caribbean or Star Wars or Star Trek. But that's starting to change, and that's the good thing. But it's taken years and years and years. Who's your favorite director, female? Do you have one? Do you even know of any female directors? Does it matter to you who directs a film? Male, female, black, white? I mean, what does it matter? And I'm answering my own question here. As long as the story is being told well, what does it matter? On that note, the story film continues. Keep looking for my announcements. See you soon. Bye.